The most important questions about AI shouldn't be how to prompt or how AI hallucinates. They should be about us.
Who shapes these systems? What do we want to become together? What kind of world are we weaving?
Welcome to Between Us and the Machine
with Margot van Brakel
and Juliette McDowell.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Welcome. Meta dissolved its diversity and inclusion programs last year. And now AI companion apps are surging all across its platforms, targeting LGBTQ users with ads for synthetic boyfriends. Design your perfect partner, choose his personality, choose his body. The promise of intimacy without risk or connection without rejection. Our question today is, what remains when uncertainty is engineered out of human experience?
Our guest today is Michael L. Buck, a digital and human rights professional with 25 years of experience in tech governance, public policy, and democracy. He spent 5 years leading public policy for Facebook across Southeast Asia, including co-leading their LGBTIQ plus employee resource group for the region. And now he's head of policy at AI Safety Asia. He writes about power, technology, and the communities most often left out of the conversation. Michael, very welcome.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So in your piece, Michael, which we're going to link, and your piece is entitled, I Kissed a Boy and I Liked It. You open with this first kiss in Singapore. Why start a piece about artificial intimacy with a story about human awkwardness?
Well, the short answer is that it's a lived experience and machines don't have lived experiences. And I thought it'd be a neat way to open it up. The longer answer is that, working in the policy space for so long, I think there's this feeling that somehow we have to be detached from emotion and attached from the things that really make us human, because we're very serious policy people doing very serious policy things. And in fact, policy making is about humans ensuring that humans can thrive and flourish. And that's why I opened that way. I hope that it encourages other people. You don't have to be queer. You could be from a religious minority or from an ethnic minority, or just have opinions that are very divergent from others. And by sharing your personal experiences and your lived experience, it makes it real. And I think it sticks better. Stories are stickier than just tossing out facts. So that's why I started with that. And I will tell you that I hesitated quite a bit before I published the article. And my mind kept racing. Should I lead with that? Should I even include it all? Will some people not like it? Will they feel uncomfortable? And eventually I thought, they can be uncomfortable. I've experienced that most of my life because I'm not a machine.
Yeah, I think it's bold that you chose to do it this way. And I'm sure that it was the right decision, because that's it will lure people in to continue reading. And it's authentic. It's your story. So no one can judge your story. It's your story. So it's a great way to open up the conversation. Now, continuing on your writing, you write about emotional armoring that queer people build before bridges. So how did your own armoring shape what you noticed about these AI companion ads?
Well, I think the thing about building walls, I wrote How We Build Walls Before Bridges. And I think building walls makes you kind of automatically skeptical and guarded and curious at the same time, but always on the lookout for, the other shoe to drop or boot to drop, or whatever the expression is. And so I kind of reacted very strongly when I saw this. And I write about that reaction in the article. A mix of fascination, but also anger because of the surveillance capitalism part. Uh, but I also think it's interesting to add that I often talk about, now I often talk about building bridges. Part of my career was in peace building, building bridges across people and communities. And what's really interesting about bridges, if you've ever watched them being constructed, particularly suspension bridges, they're built from both sides. You start with the foundations on land and you start to build these things that are suspended, big, heavy pieces of steel. And there's technical words for all this, which are escaping me at the moment. But you build towards each other. You have to trust the other person that they're going to build in the right direction so that when you meet at that very uncomfortable middle where it can get really windy and it's high above the water and it's scary, and you have to trust the other people to be following the instructions and to have your good interest in mind. And then when you finally come together, it's very satisfying because it's, I think, that uncomfortable middle in life where we have the most interesting conversations. And like a bridge, it can lead in all kinds of directions. And when we're talking about bots and synthetic people, there isn't a person on the other end. They don't have any feelings. They don't have any guts. They don't have any past experience that they're bringing to the table. And so it's kind of like building a bridge to nowhere.
Yeah.
I like that. Can we talk a little bit more about that anger? Because I really like the piece, and I'm going to quote it. You wrote, "They're targeting me because surveillance, advertising, and AI have determined something deeply personal about me." Walk us through that split second of recognition that you had, and that feeling that you had at that moment.
I think it was, oh my God, why am I getting this? And I'm laughing now. I didn't ask to see those ads. And because I work in this space, I know exactly why I got those ads.
Yeah.
It's the surveillance capitalism. It's the fact that every keystroke, every time I hovered a mouse over something, whether I clicked or not, measuring the amount of time I hesitate or the amount of time that I dwell on something, that all feeds into the machine that is run by companies like Meta and Google and others to target people. And it can be really intimate. We've probably heard in the past how people were so fascinated years ago that Google could tell that a woman was pregnant before she even knew she was pregnant because of all the signals. This is that times like 1,000. And I got angry because I started thinking, if they're able to target someone like me, what about other young people who are in the closet, aren't completely out, are still hesitating, and are maybe exploring, searching for information, and they're getting served with ads like this? And what happens if a parent or a friend happens to be hovering behind their shoulder when the ad pops up? How do they explain that? And that really kind of made me angry because ultimately it can hurt us. Even if you're not using it, the delivery of the ad can hurt you, can hurt people. And that's kind of what, yeah, my initial reaction when I saw that.
Yeah, and it could feel intrusive. I mean, you think you're in the privacy of your home, and in fact, you're not. As soon as you open up your computer, you're not. It's no longer private.
And it also makes me think of what we talked about with Ilke, that the intent, the attention integrity. So you should be able to decide where your attention goes. And now you get this ad comes into your home on your screen, deciding that your attention goes to something out of the blue. You think, why do I get this? Well, yeah, it's invasive,
Oh,
to say the least. Yeah,
it's very invasive.
yeah,
And the fact that regulators feel disempowered to be able to do much about that,
yeah,
particularly in the global majority, outside of Europe. I mean, gosh, I've had ministers tell me they feel powerless up against these big American tech companies because they have so much power. And that's why these business models perpetuate. And they create the narrative that it's the downstream effects, that the externalities. So they internalize the profits, but they externalize the problems and the harms and expect civil society and governments to clean it up. And what really needs to be done is to go at the heart of the um, the business model itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you also argue that these products, they are marketed into communities that are kind of vulnerable and already shaped by stigma and exclusion. And now, what happens then when this surveillance capitalism meets the queer loneliness? Because loneliness is also there. So it's like a vulnerability that they're tapping into. What do you see there? What's your thought on this?
Oh, it's there's a lot. If you think about, to our previous points about the business model and surveillance capitalism, just imagine the digital breadcrumbs that one is leaving behind. Through all these cookies. Cookies is a
Mhm.
really nice term because it's sweet and people love cookies, but they're actually quite harmful when they're embedded in your machines and track everything that you are doing to then serve up not only ads but also to kind of shape your own behavior. And I think that that's very exploitative and particularly harmful for people who may feel isolated, are having trouble being themselves, and leaning into technology that really hasn't been properly assessed for its effects on individuals, particularly those who may suffer from addiction or addictive personalities. And in fact, if you read my piece, I have a screenshot of an ad, and it's right there in the ad. It says that it's addictive. It says that the synthetic boyfriend is addictive. I mean, it's right there. And all of that, I think, ties together to um, um, what is the word in English, to uh, follow the most vulnerable and
Yeah.
to make a profit off them.
Yeah.
So, I don't want this episode to be against some uses of AI or some uses of technology in general. And I'm thinking about this when my brother was ill. So I had a brother, he passed by now, but in his mid 30s, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he had surgery that left him homebound. And with luck, actually, he found a platform online called Second Life, and they had supportive people in there who chatted with you, who helped you through the experience, but also you got to do things that you couldn't do in the real world.
Yeah.
And I remember how important that was for him. And he was, deep into technology, he was building things, and it was really good. And in your piece, you make that differentiation between support and substitution. And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. It's right there in what you just shared in your story. You said that he interacted with people. People were supportive. Human beings who were at the other end of the terminal. Maybe it was a camera, maybe it was text, but there was a human being there bringing their vulnerability, their uncertainties, their experiences, their fears, their hopes, their faith to bear for it to be available to others in this community if that's a tool that's useful to them. And when it's substituted by a synthetic being that doesn't bring any of that, these synthetic boyfriends are based on LLMs, which are predictions. It's prediction of what terms will come up. It's not driven by lived human experience the way we evolve as a person when we interact with others, when we face rejection or when we face hardship or we face joy. And I use the term electricity in my piece a few times, having reread it. I think that's a difference. And then importantly, have uh, for a therapeutic kind of bot or system would require that trained therapists and professionals evaluate it, that community members are involved in assessing its effectiveness and how it might impact or influence the vulnerable queer community. I mean, imagine for a moment that a high potency drug is released and a Food and Drug Authority has no role in approving whether or not it's safe to consume. We can't imagine that. Yet here we are with these apps that use artificial intelligence to create fake boyfriends, fake girlfriends, um, without the necessary testing, research methodologies to ensure that it's anything other than addictive, which again, they make very clear in their ad that it is. And I think that's a huge difference in the therapeutic use of these technologies that really can help not only a vulnerable community member, but those who want to help them as well to understand better how to coach, how to engage, how to better understand their experiences, to prepare themselves for the real human interaction that then comes.
And just to add to that just a little bit, I think also the differentiation is intentionality. And so, what is your intention in building this solution or this thing? Is your intention, I mean, in both cases, they could be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
But if your profit is derived from really extraction and addiction or from real care, and I think that that differentiation also needs to be made, that intention is everything.
Yeah, and I find an interesting frame for looking at the utility of these kinds of technologies to be a pro-social framework that a friend of mine at Sunway University in Malaysia works on. Her name is Cornelia, and she describes pro-social AI as being, it can be pro-profit, as you mentioned, but that's often where the big tech stuff stops at the profit. But being pro-social also means being pro-people, pro-potential, and pro-planet, so that the technology being used and deployed, developed, deployed, and used is something that helps humans to flourish and to thrive and to center the individual as a citizen, not as a consumer or a product. And that, you know, across the life cycle, that it's not harming the planetary health around us.
Yeah, I think pro-social is a very easy concept to take on. Like, yeah, it says everything really. So just the human aspect can never be overruled. It's what makes the difference always.
Well, and I also think that pro-social AI can be the middle way.
Yeah.
It's not American, it's not Chinese, it's not European.
Mhm.
It may be for the, some people call the middle powers, the global majority,
Mhm.
to champion, because it means that the technology serves citizens and people and communities and institutions.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
not just about making money, because if we went back and applied the same framework to these bots, these synthetic boyfriends, they wouldn't be deployed yet because the pro potential aspect hasn't been adequately addressed.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's so that's very important insight that anyone can take on. And now, Michael, I want to ask you to look into the future.
Mm.
So if we do nothing and these companion bots are scaled into the queer communities, but really what's happening is it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
What does intimacy look like for a young person in 10 years from now?
Maybe more isolation,
Yeah.
ironically, that it's
Mm.
meant to allow people to not feel isolated, but it can by driving people into their own constructed orbit or bubble in which they exist with this inanimate thing. Uh, but I think about something that recently happened to me just a week or so ago. I was visiting a friend in the Netherlands, and I ran into this person who is from East Asia and studying in the Netherlands, young, first time abroad, hadn't left home before. And he went to visit his friends in another city in Europe. And I saw him when he came back. And he said, Michael, now I realize why you and Rowdy are so happy when you see each other when you've been apart for so long. And it kind of struck me that he hadn't had that lived experience yet to
Mm.
know that feeling of missing someone and being truly joy filled when you see them again. To answer your question in this regard, my worry is that people aren't going to have that lived experience, that awkward moment, that misstep, that faux pas to look back on and cry about or laugh about, but helps us to grow as humans and to evolve and to invest into our next relationships. I mean, I remember, I don't know how long ago this was, but I really liked this guy and we hung out a lot. And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to say what I think. And I said, I just want you to know that I really like you more than a friend. And I'd like to see where it goes. And he said, I just thought that we were friends. And my heart sank. I was so embarrassed.
Mm.
I just wanted to crawl into a shell. But now that's one of these core experiences of my life that I can laugh about in retrospect. It gave me courage.
Yeah.
And when I don't have courage to do something, I think back to, wow, I had the courage to do that. And those are the experiences we draw from that make us really human. And if more and more young people rely on these artificial boyfriends or girlfriends, whether as a refuge or as um, for diversion from reality, they're missing those opportunities for growing as a human.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what I love about what you do is to articulate the human experience and to make people look back at that and really value that is it can be beautiful and it can be painful, but that really is what life is about, and it's not the artificial uh instant
Mm-hmm.
fix that is going to bring you forward in life. So it's artificial and it gives you an artificial taste of life that is not going to help you grow in any way.
Well, and it doesn't reflect the reality.
Exactly.
These bots are designed to not disappoint, to always
Exactly.
satisfy,
Yeah.
to be what you want. And growth is, well, what do they say? The insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result. And as humans, we experience things and we fail, we succeed, we fail, we succeed. And so we learn that we can't do the same thing over and over again because it will fail. And if you're in an environment where everything is curated and you feel like you're always right, then the real life happens and it's harder to realize that feeling of missing someone, or that rejection isn't the end all. It may actually be the beginning of something really beautiful.
Yeah.
So, um, if we get this right, because you mentioned about not having an oversight of these things, but if we build these guardrails around artificial intelligence, what does a healthy ecosystem look like?
Well, I think a healthy ecosystem is a function of healthy policies that we develop to bend the trajectory of technology in a direction, as I've mentioned, that supports human flourishing and allows citizens to thrive. That ecosystem requires that it's not an AI lab or a for profit company deciding this is a cool little gadget. I'm going to throw it out into the wild and see what happens. And, if someone gets hurt, that's the externality of, innovation. And if you look at history of social media, when these harms happen, usually companies only do something about it when there is a PR fire. And usually the PR fires, not always, usually the most important ones are from the United States, Europe, and then other major markets in that order. And often what happens in the global majority or communities that are hidden in the shadows doesn't reach that level of fire. And so there's no incentive to do something about it. So that ecosystem needs to have the guardrails in place to ensure that technology is bending in the direction that centers citizens and not the profit making of the companies. And so, in this regard, it means the involvement of LGBTQ plus communities. It means the involvement of therapists and counselors and people who are experts on addiction and behavior, psychology. It also means having organizations and individuals who can help train those who develop public policies and who design legislation and regulation. All of that is part of this ecosystem that could support the healthy use of these technologies. But we're not there yet, and we need to build toward that. And I think again how pro-social is a really good way to look at that and to assess where the gaps are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that pro-social is something that it's we pinned that now, so that's something that we shouldn't forget. You propose 4 regulatory areas. So which one meets the most resistance? So what are these areas, and which one meets the most resistance when you discuss this with policymakers?
Well, I think I hinted at it earlier, and that going up against these big tech companies, so regulating them is always very difficult because big tech has captured the market on the narrative that regulation will inhibit innovation. And I think we all know that's bunk. And increasingly, I think more and more policymakers recognize this. But unfortunately, across the global majority, policymakers are at a disadvantage because they are under resourced, overtaxed in terms of their responsibilities. And when they hear really good stories from very smart people that any kind of regulation is going to inhibit innovation, which will then inhibit economic growth in their country, and they don't want to be responsible for that, it sounds pretty good. Okay, it's a good story. I get it. Let me go work on hunger and education now. And I think that means there's a big role for civil society and academia and researchers to play to shift that narrative. The other challenge, big challenge, is that despite the fact that these harms are happening to queer people, it's not everywhere that policymakers even care to pay attention because there are communities that aren't always important or accepted or endorsed. In fact, in some places, you can be put to death for being gay. In the region where I live, that is the case. And so I think those are the really big challenges. I mean, the other one, some of the recommendations I give, are to the tech companies. And by tech companies, I mean ad companies, because they're really about ads.
Yeah.
And selling ads. Who elected them to decide when it's okay for certain kinds of ads? I feel like that's a role for democratically elected authorities and for communities to be involved in, which then gets into your ecosystem question.
Yeah.
So we're coming to a close here, and I feel like we can talk a long time. But I want to end with what you ended with, which was the Singapore kiss, the electricity of not knowing. I think that's how you phrased it. So, what question about humanity are you still trying to answer?
Well, that I think the big question I'm trying to, there are a couple. One is, and it's linked to my last answer, why are people still afraid of people who are not like them? Whether you're a different color or you love differently or eat differently or believe differently, we're all humans. We can build bridges. And yeah, it's uncomfortable in the middle of the bridge. But guess what? It's not always windy, and you can always hold hands and make it to either end. In those spaces, that's where it can be awkward. That's where you can face rejection, anger, or instability. But those are also where the moments of serendipity happen. And I think that this constant optimizing out the inconveniences in our lives and optimizing out the things that are uncomfortable, like being rejected, is eliminating opportunities for us to experience this serendipity. And sometimes with that serendipity, it ends up with butterflies in your stomach because you just cannot take your eyes off someone and you're so excited to meet them the next time. And I really don't want technology to take that away from us.
We deserve the butterflies.
We do. Everybody does.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was. That's it for today. Thanks for being part of this conversation.
Subscribe wherever you listen and share this with someone who should hear it.
This is Between Us
and the Machine.